make you intelligent, but we're going to try to prove otherwise. This is the Clashing Sabers podcast. I am one of your hosts, Brandon, and I'm here with my co-host. He's the man who balanced daughter and son through a whisper in the wind. It's
Davor.
Davor, how are we doing today, buddy?
Doing good. How are you?
I am good. I'm excited to be here. Always excited for Clashing Sabers. Always excidet to talk about what we're going to get into tonight, which is talking about service over conflict through the lens of Star Wars. So for those of you who have been a part of the show, have been listening to the show for the past few episodes, we're, of course, going through the book that I'm working on, the Jedi Path 2, looking at each chapter that's going to be in the book, and not necessarily talking about what's going to be in the chapter. Some of the things will be in there, some of them won't, but just looking at the ideas that are going to be present and exploring them a little bit more, in connecting them, of course, to Star Wars, as we do with all things. So that book, The Jedi Path 2, will be coming out holiday season this year, and I will keep you guys posted on all of that as more information becomes available. But I am hard at work at it right now, and the chapter we're going to talk about tonight, like I said, is service over conflict, or stewardship, if you want to call it that. It's going to be a really fun conversation to get into, and I'm looking very much forward to it. And Davor, glad to do it with you.
Always glad to do this.
So let's get into not service over conflict quite yet, but let's get into the most important question that we ask on this show. Not what's the balance of the Force, not when are we getting our Batch 8 movie. Oh, early plug of Batch 8 in there. Look at that.
Oh, man. Woo.
I know. First
That's
time for
record.
everything. First time. All right. Mixing it up tonight. Davor, what are you Star Warsing lately?
I just finished Low Red Moon.
Okay.
Yeah.
And?
I really liked it. You're getting an article for the website. It's already
Let's
begun.
go.
Yep.
All right. I love a good article for the website. I guess I should read that book so that I don't get spoiled on the article and people don't have to wait 8 months to read it.
Yeah, it's a good book.
Is it? Okay.
It's good to have Mike Chen back. I mean, I don't know that he ever really left, but it is good to have him back writing Star Wars books.
What a dude, man. Mike Chen he crushes it every time.
He really does.
So you played Outlaws, right?
Yes.
Do you need any context from Outlaws to really understand the book?
No, it helps that it's really a prequel novel. So it's sort of like the Inferno Squad book in the sense of, like, if you played Battlefront 2 and you know who Iden and Del and Gideon all are, like, that kind of helps because you get a sense of, like, where these characters are going to go and end up. But if you haven't played the game, it's just a book about Inferno Squad. And this is sort of in a similar way. Like, if you played Outlaws, then you sort of know a little bit more. Like, you have some, like, additional context for, like, where these characters are going to go and the conflicts that are going to come up. But if you haven't played the game, don't know anything about the story of the game, haven't watched any cutscene things or read anything online, then it's kind of just its own kind of self-contained, underworld story.
Okay. All right, I dig it. Yeah, I can get behind that. It's in my Kindle, ready to read. It's sitting on my shelf, ready to read. I did start the Finn and Janna book. Not super far into it. The Last Order, I think.
Yes, yeah. I always have to, like Last and Final Order. Like every time I have to stop and think about, like, which one's which.
Yeah. So maybe I'll put that on pause and check out Low Red Moon, because I honestly wasn't really looking forward to the book before this conversation right now. But I know, knowing you and knowing what you get excited about Star Wars, I think it's definitely going to be good, because you tend to enjoy the fun side of Star Wars, the adventure romps of it all. And so definitely gets me looking forward to that. I finally finished Master of Evil.
Hell yeah.
So that was really good. I don't think did we talk about that on the last episode? I can't remember.
No, I think you were still finishing it.
Okay. Yeah, so of course we'll have our Don't Burn the Sacred Text. Lindsay and I had some scheduling conflicts that stopped us from being able to record, but we're going to get that one out soon for you guys. That's the next episode of Don't Burn that'll come out. Just spoiler alert on my opinions, not on the book. Overall, I really liked it. I thought it was really good. I thought, just shameless plug, I thought your article added a lot of depth to the book.
Thank you.
So definitely, if you guys have read it, go check that out. over on ClashingSabers.net. It's always interesting when you get a book that is about a character and that character is not the protagonist of the book.
Yeah.
So it's a complicated thing, and I have a complicated relationship with books like that. But kind of like you talked about, it is hard to have the villain be your protagonist at the same time. So have some nitpicks with the book overall. But that's what we do here is we pick our nits, and we'll talk about it more on Don't Burn the Sacred Text. But the big thing that's happened is not me finishing that book. The big thing that's happened is that I'm watching Skeleton Crew again. Oh, that's not where you thought I was going to go with that. Not where you thought I was going to go with that.
No.
Yeah,
I'm glad
I'm
to hear that.
Oh, dude, so good. This is the first time I watched it. Like when it was coming out, I was rewatching episodes, and stuff. This is the first time I'm watching it like all the way through. Since around that time when it came out at the end of 2024, beginning of 2025. So still holds up. Still a fantastic show.
It's so good.
It's so good, dude. Like the writing is on point. The character development is on point. There was a moment I always think about with acting, if I stop realizing who you are and you just become the character, that says a lot about you as an actor and the writing that you're able to embrace. I was like 5 episodes in, whatever the episode is where they find the treasure on Skull Island or whatever it's called. I don't even remember what it's called. And I went, oh, Jude Law's in this.
Yes.
You just forget because it's just so good.
Yeah.
That, he's almost secondary to, like, the fact that Jude Law's in it is completely secondary, rather, to the show. Because the kids, the acting is so good, the story is so good, the development is on point, the pacing is on point. Like, I guess you could, of course, and we did with our Best and Butts episodes of it, like, look at some of the things that have problems. But when you really look at the show overall, it's great.
It is. It's really good, and I wish I could hold out hope that we will get more, but I don't think so, and I think that's a shame because it's just like as we talked about on that Best and Butts episode, it's like it's so good. It just opens up this whole other pocket of the galaxy where there's like so many interesting things that you could do and interesting stories that you can tell, and I'm really glad. If, again, as is most likely, this is the one and only season we ever get of the show, I'm glad that we got it.
Yeah. And to think, too, about the fact that, like, when this was coming out, we were like, do we even know what the show's about? Do we even want to watch this? Like, nobody was really super pumped about Skeleton Crew coming out. And then to almost universally have it be beloved is, again, it's a testament to these creators and the care that they put into it, I'm not saying that, like, shows that didn't do as well, the people put less care into it or anything like that. It's not a comparison thing. It's just a statement of, these people care about what they're making. And when we pick people who have the right skills to be able to do that, it really ends up working out quite well, as can be seen through Andor, Skeleton Crew, Mandalorian. Like, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't make this argument, but there's an argument to be made that Skeleton Crew is the second best Star Wars show.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. For me personally, it's Andor, then Skeleton Crew.
Is it? Okay. So
so
talk more
live
about
action,
that.
Like live action Disney Plus shows, like, yes, that's it for me. Like, why is it that high?
Yeah.
I think it just I think it really gets back to the fact that, like, again, you talked about our best of butts. Like, there were nitpicks that we all had on that episode, and like little things here and there that don't totally work. But like beyond that, I think the show just really kind of fires on all cylinders. I think like the acting is super. Like the kids are incredible.
So
Jude Law is like as you were talking about, like. That's one of those things where, like, if you pause for a moment, you're like, why is Jude Law in this? Like, what's he doing here? But like, it totally works. Like, he's so good in that role, and the performance he gives is so great. So like, all the acting is on point. We just talked a little bit about, like, the story is like it's so fun. I think it works so well as like a show I mean, this is interesting, kind of contrasting it with Andor, putting them 1 and 2 is like it is a show that like doesn't have much in the way of like capital S stakes in the sense of like the fate of the galaxy is not like turning here on like what these kids and these pirates are doing. It's just this little like it obviously matters to the characters in the story and like there's stakes within the story, but there's not like oh like the Republic, the Empire, you know, freedom, and all of that stuff. Which like you get great stories out of it. Andor is a great story about all those capital S big stakes, but then it's also fun to just kind of have this sort of like great little adventure here. And I do think like it gets so much back to like some of the like the heart of Star Wars of like it is like it is for 11 year like the trope, right? Like it's made for 10-year-olds and like it literally stars 10, 11, 12-year-olds. And yeah, I think for all those reasons, and then also talking about like as I talk about like the new slice of the galaxy and like Ad-Atten and the jewels of the old Republic and like what's going on with that, like it's all so interesting and like it just immediately invites you like, oh, I want to know more. Like what's happening here? Like what happened on the other planets that are now just war zones? What's going on? It's so good.
We really need to explore that Jewels of the Old Republic thing more. Like that's a huge thing to come out of that show that like we're probably never going to talk about again.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it could, you know, potentially it could be like one of those things that, you know, we've gotten so many times in Star Wars elsewhere is that like we may not get obviously like we may not get a Skeleton Crew season 2, but if we let's say we get more High Republic stories or we eventually get stories in the old like the actual old Republic, like capital Old Republic, maybe that's something that gets revisited, right? Like we've gotten that like you think about something a place like Jeddah, right? Jeddah we get in Rogue One, we see it there in that one movie. But then now we've gotten like all this other story about Jeddah going back hundreds of years, and you get all this lore, and we find out more about it. So like we could potentially get it that way, even if we don't get more Skeleton Crew story.
That's a good point. I think books are a perfect place to explore that. You know, more. I don't think it'll happen this way, but you could have like a Jewels of the Old Republic like series and have because I think there was like 5 planets or something like that, and like have a 5-book series, you know, of like how they got established, how they got named Jewels of the Old Republic, things of that nature. Could be really cool. So yeah, I mean, Skeleton Crew is just a joyride, man. It's just an absolute joyride, and it hits the heart of what I think Star Wars really is. You know, like you said, the stakes are what they are, but it really comes down to the actors that really draw you into that story. And so for you, why not the Mandalorian? Why, you know, because we've got more of the Mandalorian. Where does that fall on your list?
Ooh, I gotta now think of what are the other shows. I would say probably
we got Ahsoka.
Yeah. Let's see. You know, we got Ahsoka, we got Obi-Wan. Am I forgetting anybody that's on a Book of Boba Fett?
Yeah,
I think that's everybody.
Acolyte.
I think Acolyte. Yeah, I think Mando is probably number 3. I would say it's next. Yeah.
Okay. So then, where you stand on? We got to talk about it now. The Mando and Grogu movie coming out. We got the trailer. Thoughts?
Yeah. So we finally have a full trailer. It was good. Like I kind of finished it and I was like, okay, Favroni, like all right, like I'm digging what you're putting down here. I think we now finally again like we don't have it obviously totally, but it's still nice to get a little bit of insight on like what is this movie about, which is the thing we've all been kind of wondering. And we still don't have like the trailer was by no means like a synopsis or anything or like a like Wikipedia summary of what the movie is, but you still get a sense of like okay, like kind of what he's at least part of like what he's going after, and then there's going to be the things we don't know about that are also going to be happening in this movie. But I really enjoyed it. I think it is. I kind of always had this feeling that the movie was going to be this way, but in a lot of ways, like this affirmed that like this movie is very much just going to be in that sort of like action adventure lane. Like the immediate comparison that came to mind is Solo, which is like in the same way. I was just like here like it's not going to be like politics. It's not going to be like anything else. Like it's going to be this sort of like space adventure excitement. Here we're going to all these planets and and all of that. So I think that's kind of expectations wise what I'm going to be going into it.
Yeah, I think I think it's a popcorn movie, man. I think it's just a rocking good time. It's going to be a ton of action, adventure. We saw some really cool scenes, like with Mando shooting the fire and then shooting the stormtroopers. We got Stinky back officially, known by no other name here on this show. Stinky got swole, so that's gonna be fun. I really think we're gonna get like one scene of him. Like, I don't think
that's it.
I think if any of the Hutts are gonna be like a big deal, it's gonna be the twins. So I'll be interested to see how they tie it all together, because we got a lot of stuff in here. We got Embo, we've got all these Hutts, we have whatever the Imperial threat is, all of that stuff coming into play. So it's going to be a challenge for them to not overdo it with this movie, I think, because there's so many characters and so many things you can bring in. Like, I'm assuming we're not going to get like Bo-Katan or any of the other Mandalorians. Like, I think he's going to be the only Mandalorian that we get, which I think is the smart move to make in this one. Follow the kind of if we're going to get more Mando and Grogu movies, and you want to bring them in later, I think that makes sense, kind of following the model of what the show did. But right now, establish these characters, establish where they're at, establish the world they're living in, and take us on a really good ride. The thing I was amazed by, I think, the most was how many monsters we got and how many aliens we got. Like, it was just jam-packed with monsters and aliens. We, of course, are going back to Now Hutta, it looks like, with there's that white snake from the Hunt for Zero episodes of the Clone Wars. We'll go to Navarro, so we're going to be jumping planets around. So what got you, I think, or I'd like to know, what got you the most excited about the movie? Because like you said, you kind of were not, super excited about it yet, wondering what it's about, and now you're fully on board.
Yep. Well, I think it was nice to see some of the kind of the set pieces and all of that, like you mentioned, like some of the action scenes. I do, we did get a little bit of like, I guess, what do we want to say? Like, might be, or at least part of sort of the heart of the movie. We get those little bits where we see Grogu meditating and we hear Din talking about how, like, I'm not going to be around for forever and I have to, make sure that he can fend for himself and all of that. So I think we're going to, I think it was nice to see that. And also just even like in those moments where we do get Grogu in the trailer, like, starting to see him kind of come into his own more as his own character, as opposed to like a prop or a sort of MacGuffin that people are fighting over and like, oh, he has Grogu and then we got to get him back and then Grogu's gone again and all of that. Getting to see him actually like be like doing things in this world and like making decisions and all of that, I think is really important in terms of advancing the story and kind of like figuring out, like, as we had talked about a while back, like, where do these characters go? How do you develop them? Like, a big thing is like making Grogu more than just kind of this cute prop.
Yeah, and we got some of that at the end of season 3 of the show. So I think starting this movie with that, and it feels like they're going to start the movie with that. Like, it's not going to be something that progresses throughout the movie where he gains agency and stuff throughout the movie. Feels like we're going to start the movie there, and I'm a big fan of that as a concept. I think Grogu honestly was the best part of the trailer for me, because we got that balance of the cute stuff with like don't touch the buttons and the cookie and all of that stuff, right? That is going to draw in the general audience and, people who have fallen in love with Grogu for that aspect of him. But then we also got him like tightening the armor and stuff, where he's like, all right, let's do this. So I'll be interested to see, like, long term, now that they brought up this idea, like, and actually said it, of I'm not going to be around for a large part of his life. What do they actually do age-wise with these two characters, right? Because at what point, if we continue to get these stories of Mando and Grogu as a success, and whether it goes back to TV or continues in movies, like, at some point we'll get the death of Mandalorian, of Din Djarin, and we don't know how the Yoda species ages, other than that they can live for up to 900 years or over 900 years. So do we have cutesy Grogu? Do we get teenage Grogu? You know, like how does that work, and what does that look like? I think is a really interesting question, just in terms of the kind of character development we get for him over the movie. And I do hope that we get some kind of character development for these two characters. Like, I think that's what made, when you go back and revisit it, season 1 and season 2 stand out so much more than season 3. I loved season 3 of Mandalorian, but season 3 of Mandalorian, the character development was about the culture more than the individuals, right? And so I hope that we don't just have, oh, they were, you know, not fighting the or not, you know, doing this at the beginning of the movie, now they're doing this at the end of the movie. Like, I want actual, like, they were this kind of person, now they're this kind of person.
Yeah. Yes.
You know what I mean?
100%.
So, I think that's going to be, for me, kind of the, I don't want to say make or break of the movie, but that's going to be the big turning point about whether this ranks highly in here. And when we do our best and butts, you know, post episode for this movie, what that list looks like, because that's going to be kind of a linchpin for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. Like, yes, have the action, have the adventure, give us the laughs and all that, but like, I also do want to see character growth and development. I think that's going to play a big part in terms of like where I feel it stacks up against the other Star Wars movies.
Yeah, I think Solo is a great comparison, though, of like people coming in with kind of lowered expectations and walking out after just having a good time. Solo was a weird experience for me because I walked out going, that was my least favorite Star Wars movie, but I still loved it, you know, which hadn't happened before for me. Every time I'd walked out of a Star Wars movie, it'd been my favorite Star Wars movie. Yes. So that was a unique experience. But then it happened again with Rise of Skywalker. So I think I'm able to go into this movie going like, I don't really have to worry about where this ranks. I just have to worry about enjoying the movie, you know? And I think maybe some of the, we'll call them failures of these other movies, kind of take some of the pressure off Mando and Grogu of like, there's more Star Wars movies coming. Not everyone has to be Endgame. Not everyone has to be Force Awakens, you know? Right. I think the only thing that really hinges on this movie is whether we get more Mando and Grogu content, which I feel like is pretty safe bet. If they make their money back and a little bit more, they're going to make more of this stuff. I think the real question is, do they take it back to TV? Do they keep it in movies, or do they do both? So for you, if you're making the decisions for that, what's the linchpin decider? Is it fan reaction? Is it money made? Is it cost benefit ratio? Like, what are you thinking if you are Lin-Win Brennan, sorry.
Yeah. I think probably it will come down to box office. Like if this is a like, let's just, I don't know if this is, I mean, it might be what they're shooting for. I don't know how realistic. Let's just say it's $1 billion movie, because like $1 billion is like you hit it big, right? Like Deadpool and Wolverine level, like Top Gun Maverick. Like, let's say you get to that level, like $1 billion. Like, we're 100% getting more Mando and Grogu movie. Like no question about it that there's gonna be more. If it, let's say, like, it breaks even and like then some, you know, just like a little bit off the top, maybe it's like $500 million, or I don't know what the budget of this movie is, so I don't know what their break even point would be necessarily. Where then maybe it's more of a question. Like I feel like it going back to streaming almost feels like the least likely option. Like
it really does.
Like most to least likely feels like you know, it would go somewhere like more Mando Grogu movie, nothing, and then back to streaming. Like I would put nothing higher odds than we get Mando season 4.
And I almost don't want Mando season 4, to be totally honest with you, because I feel like we got that contained story. You know, it feels like a good ending for the streaming TV side of Mando and Grogu to end there with them on Navarro. And then now this is the sequel to that in the new era, you know. It's the reboot, the rebirth, however you want to call it. It will feel weird if it goes. It's almost like back in the day when things used to go like direct to DVD or direct to VHS as sequels or whatever,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
you'd like randomly get like The Lion King 2 or something like that would like actually come out in theaters or whatever. It feels like that, where it's like you can't take it back to something smaller after you've taken it to the big screen. So I think we'll have to see. We're gonna have a lot to say about it, of course, on our preview Best in Butts episode. Over on Sith Talk, we're gonna do a review of the trailer on our next episode, so you'll get more of that there. So lots going on, lots happening there. Of course, we've got Maul that we're gonna be covering too, coming out in April. So there's gonna be a lot of new content coming out for us to cover, which is gonna be a lot of fun. But for right now, we're going to move on and talk about our topic for the night, which is the content that I'm creating in the book that I mentioned, The Jedi Path 2. Cheap plug, cheap pop. There you go. But tonight we're going to look at a chapter that I've actually finished writing, at least the first draft of, and that is putting service over conflict. And in other words, stewardship and how we steward in the future and stuff like that. So I like to start these conversations just kind of general, and see, Davor, where you land. So for you, what does stewardship or putting service over conflict mean in Star Wars?
Ooh, yeah, that's a tough one.
It's a big question.
It's a big question. Yeah, I think what it means in the context of Star Wars is having characters or like if you take like the Jedi Order, right, like some order or organization that sees itself as defending or embodying a set of values, right, or aspirations. Like you think about the go back to A New Hope and you get Obi-Wan, right? For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic. Like you sort of like when we were talking about this topic and like you brought it up, like my brain kind of first went to that line because that really does feel like he's sort of describing the Jedi there as sort of like stewards, right? The guardians of like both the Old Republic as sort of an institution, as a thing that exists in the galaxy, but then also these more kind of abstract ideals, peace, justice. And then, that other element you were talking about of sort of like service over conflict is like, trying to seek, the peaceful route, trying to find, agreement or points of commonality over resorting to violence and stuff like that, right? Like you think about like Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon in Phantom Menace, and they're showing up at the Trade Federation and Naboo, right? Like they're there to like do obviously like, they're coming armed with lightsabers, and they're ready to fight if and when they need to, but they're coming first and foremost to try and settle this dispute through diplomacy, essentially, with the Trade Federation.
Yeah, I think it comes down to what George Lucas said about the light versus the dark. The light side is selfless and the dark side is selfish.
Yes.
And that selflessness puts other people and serving other people over seeking that selfless conflict that's going to try to gain power or try to control. And I really think like letting go of control is the key thing. Like the idea of Luke and Anakin always comes back to my mind when I'm thinking about putting service over conflict, and how, and I'm sure we'll get into this later, but like how Anakin becomes so in need for control, and how Luke is willing to let go of that and to trust and to put supporting others first. I even think actually more than Luke, like Leia is a prime example of that.
Yes.
And how she is constantly putting others' needs above herself. So how do you think that stewardship looks different than like trying to have that control that Anakin had? Like you mentioned Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and trying to choose diplomacy. Is it that? Is it, an internal motivation? Like how does that kind of Where's that line between the two?
Yeah, I think there is a big part of the selfishness versus selflessness element of it all. I think there's like, because I think in stewardship, I think you have the selfless element of like you are the ideals that you're defending, or the people that you're defending, or the institutions you're defending, like you're doing so because you have a faith in them or belief in them, or a desire to see the light and life flourish, right? Like, and you're willing potentially in some extreme cases to lay down your own life, or to engage in self-sacrifice for the purpose of making sure that like the light wins out at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Versus in the case of control, you come like there your motivation is much more from a self-interested standpoint. So if you brought up Anakin, and let's look at him, which I think is a prototypical example in terms of his fall to the dark side. Like we see like the motivation, obviously the stated motivation is he has these dreams about Padme, and she's going to die in childbirth and all of that, and he doesn't want that to happen to her the way that it happened to his mom. And then he gets this carrot promised about control over life and death through the dark side, and he's doing it ostensibly to save Padme. And on the surface, you might think, oh, okay, he's being noble and selfless or whatever. Like he wants to help out this person that he loves, and he doesn't want her to die. But then you think about the in Revenge of the Sith and the knighting ceremony, when he's on his knees and pledging himself to Sidious, and he says, "Just help me save Padme's life. I can't live without her." Right? Like it's self-centered, right? The value of Padme is not in and of herself as her own life. It's what value she's playing to him.
Really,
and you see that kind of play out at the end in Mustafar, where as soon as he thinks she betrayed him, he's done, right? He force chokes her. Like immediately she has lost that value to him. She's betrayed him, and therefore he's willing to, put her life in danger. So you see sort of how like that desire for control is coming less from that kind of selfless desire, and more like you're fulfilling some kind of need or desire that you have in yourself.
Yeah, and I think there's something about like free will there too. Like Anakin tries to take over Padme's will.
Yes.
It takes away her authenticity and her autonomy in trying to gain that control. And Stewardship says, I'm going to give to you even when you are not adding value to me.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, we talk about the Jedi losing their way in the Clone Wars and stuff like that. I almost wonder if the Jedi lost their way in creating an enemy in the Sith. Yes, the Sith are evil. The Sith do wrong. All of that stuff. I'm not gonna say that like we should be validating the choices that the Sith are making, but like in creating a sworn enemy, you almost take away their autonomy in a way. You almost take away their free will by saying like you are wrong, and I'm going to try to end you for being wrong, instead of I'm going to serve a way that's going to create a world where your wrong doesn't have as much power. Now what that looks like, becomes a lot more complicated than just, pew pew swing a lightsaber. So not necessarily like for a kids movie, but there is, when you take away and you're talking about him force choking Padme, made me think of this. Like when you take away the almost the rights of somebody else to be who they are, Padme, she doesn't say it directly, but it's kind of, to me, it's always been implied, like she's willing to die in childbirth, in order to not lose what they have. And Anakin can't fathom that. And I think that's the difference, is Padme sees herself as a steward for the future, whether that's through her kids or through her policy. And Anakin sees himself as the answer to everything, which you can't blame the man who's been told he's the chosen one for, over a decade. It goes to your head at some point. So, you can understand that. And I think that's where it becomes complicated of like, when do you have power and when do you start trying to own that power, right? And the Jedi had power that was given to them, and then they tried to control that power. Palpatine is not wrong when he says, all who are afraid, or all who gain power are afraid to lose it, even the Jedi. Like,
Yeah.
Yoda and Mace like hide the truth because they're afraid of losing their position and power.
Yeah.
Like, that's just the
Yeah.
reality of things. What does it mean to be like entrusted with that power without trying to own it and control it? And like, what does that look like in Star Wars? Do we have any examples of that come to mind?
To be entrusted with power, but not to own or control it.
Yeah.
Oh, that is a good question.
Because like my mind immediately goes to Kanan there, honestly.
Oh, okay.
Like he's given this power to lead in the rebellion, to train Ezra in the dark times and stuff like that. And I go honestly to the episode with Luminara and the do or do not, there is no try, that threads its way throughout that episode. And when he goes to the end, he says, I'm not going to try anymore. I'm just going to do. And that to me is that release of trying to own and control this power that he has, and instead just let it flow, and he's going to serve the greater good of Ezra's training there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example. I think you could maybe even potentially make a case for Rey. Like, you think about it at the end of Rise of Skywalker, right?
That's
where
a good
like
point.
where she is, she's hearing all the voices of the Jedi past, and she's letting them motivate her, and she talks about how she's all the Jedi. And you think like you get the concept of like, I'm all the Sith and I'm all the Jedi, and like they're sort of saying the same thing, but also not, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Like you think in the case of Palpatine, what he's saying is that he's literally a kind of like, he is like the end game of the Sith. Like, he is like the final culmination of this 1,000+ year order that has existed. Like, all of it has come up to be him. Versus what Rey is saying there is like, she's almost sort of this like conduit. Like, she is going to be like she's sort of the one who is like, she's there being sort of lifted up sort of metaphorically by all the Jedi that came before her, and they're inspiring her. And she is going to sort of be the one that fulfills their kind of their goal of ultimately vanquishing the Sith.
Well, and the way that Palpatine talks about it, it's contained in him.
Yes.
Whereas in Rey, it's expanding who she is.
Yes.
And I think that kind of is a really good point when it comes to serving over being in conflict. Like, conflict tries to make things small, tries to compact them to make them controllable, whereas service tries to make things bigger and opens up opportunities. And I think when we look at the Jedi in the Clone Wars, for example, like, they became so insular and small, where it's like, we have to stay within ourselves. Whereas you compare that to a Rey, to a Luke, to even a Kanan, where it's like, we're opening ourselves up to these possibilities and these outcomes. That's that selflessness that comes through. So do you think when we look at the Jedi in the prequel era, was it the Clone Wars that caused that kind of almost shut off and almost need for conflict in order to have a definition for who they were? Or was that something that started? Did we see it in the High Republic starting to sow the seeds? Did it happen earlier, or was the Clone Wars the thing that caused that shift, in your opinion?
I mean, I think we do. I think we have shades of it earlier. Like, you think about in phase 3 of the High Republic, once you get sort of the post Starlight, and you've got the Nile Crisis, and you get things like the Guardian protocols and whatnot. You start getting sort of a more militarized Jedi, not obviously to the degree that you ultimately get as in terms of the Clone Wars, but you do see them start to move into a kind of more aggressive stance, and you do see like you do see Jedi within the Order kind of start kind of being like, oh, like what are we doing here? What's going on? Like, how are we changing? That's a big part of oh my god, which book is it that has Reef in it? I think, is it Tears of the Nameless? I think, where like a big part of that is like, it's him in the conversations with Aslan, and he's kind of wrestling with where the Jedi are going in terms of their efforts to defeat the Nile. So I think you get it there. I do think like the Clone Wars are, I mean, important for a lot of reasons in terms of the history and the story of the Jedi, but I think are really important in terms of like where a lot of this comes to a head, because it's like, you know, I quoted the Obi-Wan line about peace and, you know, guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic. And what Palpatine is ultimately able to do with the Clone Wars is he's able to kind of leverage the, you know, the Jedi's commitment to these ideals and do so by and put them in a kind of difficult situation. Because like you think about it from the Jedi's point of view, it's like, okay, like you're the guardians of the Republic, you're, you know, you're keepers of the peace, you know, you're preserving justice. Like, does that mean you let the separatists leave? Like, do you let the Republic fall apart? Like,
Yeah.
like maybe you don't. So it's like, well, then if you're going to keep the Republic together and they're trying to leave, then your option is to force them to stay, right? Like it starts getting into like these. You start getting these sort of like noble means, but then they start getting channeled by circumstance into these ends where it's like, oh, like, do we really want to go there?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because like when you look at what else were they supposed to do is always the question, you know. I think for me it's a matter of like, should they have been on the front lines, or should they have been advising in the background, not necessarily like even like hidden, but you know, trying to bring diplomatic solutions to things before they devolved into war. Because even, you know, Obi-Wan's called the great negotiator, and like how much do we actually see him negotiating during the Clone Wars?
No, we barely. It's so funny that Grievous is like, oh, the negotiator. He's like, do we see it?
We got like one that was like a diversion of
just a war crime. Like like what?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But like you brought up the referenced the High Republic. I actually go back to like phase 1 of the High Republic, and that moment when Stellan is holding Chancellor So in his arms as she is, you know, presumed to be dying. That is the moment I went, oh, okay, so that's the shot we heard around the world to me, of the Jedi and the Republic becoming intertwined. And then, of course, we see it through the things that you mentioned in the progression there. But that's the moment for me that it really stood out of like, okay, they are sowing some seeds. Like they're literally just putting the seed in the ground. They're not letting it grow yet.
Yeah.
But the more intertwined the two became, I think the less the Jedi were stewards and the more the Jedi were distributed to handle conflicts. You know, you even look at like something like that business on Cato Nemoidia, and now we have Brotherhood, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, there's an example, honestly, of Obi-Wan trying to negotiate. But like Anakin comes in straight to conflict, you know, and stuff like that. We don't see the Jedi serving a lot, you know, and I think that's something that I like about Kanan and Ezra as characters, is like we get to see them serving quite a bit, you know. Even at the beginning, it might be in the first episode or maybe the second episode of the series. We see them distributing the fruits to Tarkin Town, you know. That's the kind of thing. And I think that's something that Avar talks about in Eye of Darkness when she's like distributing the grain, is like, well, I want to just help people.
Yeah.
But I'm also not reaching my full potential by just doing that. So it's a catch-22 where at some point you have to fight. And I don't, you know, I am all for pacifism. I'm all for that, right? As the first option, but sometimes it's not the final option. Sometimes you have to wield a lightsaber. Sometimes you have to fight. So how do you then fight without losing that sense of service? Is it your motivation? Is it your action? Is it a mix of the two? And then, like, do we have examples of that in Star Wars? Like, my mind immediately goes to Luke as like the premium example, but do you have something else that comes to mind for you?
let's see. How do you fight without losing, your
That
commitment? Yeah.
to service. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
to service. I you know, I think a lot of it, I think that is a big thing in Star Wars in terms of like motivation being key, like
Hmm.
like where you're coming from really does. I think like one of the morals in Star Wars is like that's a big part as far as determining like why you're doing what you're doing, because like we see Jedi. We have those great examples of where the Jedi don't. You have the throwing away the lightsabers of it all, right? Like you have all those examples where Jedi are willing to kind of set down their weapons or not engage in conflict and whatnot. But then you do also see them sometimes having to bust out the lightsaber. Yeah, go back to the example I cited before. Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, they come to Naboo. The goal is peaceful diplomacy to talk through with the Trade Federation. And then there's poison gas and battle droids show up and they gotta take out the lightsabers, right? And like it's just like
Yeah.
as you said, like there's some cases in which like that is when you are trying to be killed, it is almost inevitable that like you will probably you know, have to throw it down. But then the question is like, where are you, right? Like where are you coming from that, and like what's driving you? Because like ultimately, with the Luke moment in Jedi, like the reason he throws away the lightsaber is that realization that if he continues fighting, he's fighting from this place of hate and anger, and if he keeps doing it, he will become his father. And the only way that he cannot become his father in that moment is to throw away the weapon.
Yeah, and I think it's a matter of knowing where your line in the sand is, you
Yeah.
know? For Luke, it was killing his father. He made that very clear to Obi-Wan. He made that very clear to Yoda. Like, I can't, he literally says, I can't kill my own father. And when he realizes, oh, I'm about to forego that, I'm about to do that, that's what stops him.
Yeah.
Is he knew what his line in the sand was. I don't think the Jedi of the prequel era knew where their line was at. And
Yeah.
that cost them quite a bit.
Yeah. Or even think of here's another good example that just popped on my mind when you were talking about lines in the sand. And I guess there's some literalism because there's literal sand involved here. But I think about Obi-Wan and Twin Sons, right? Like think about that confrontation with Maul, where Maul shows up, and Maul is obviously coming from this place of like great anger and hatred towards Obi-Wan, and he wants to strike him down, all that. Obi-Wan does not react aggressively at first, right? Like he's just there, he's just like talking to him and all that, and Maul is getting riled up and he's trying to rile Obi-Wan up, but again, Obi-Wan's he's just keeping his cool. He's just talking to him. He's like, I'm not gonna, like, I know I see what you're trying to bait me. I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah.
And the moment that he turns on the lightsaber, when you find out, is when Maul threatens Luke. That's his tipping point, right? Like Obi-Wan doesn't really care about himself. He doesn't have the beef with Maul anymore. He's moved on. Where Maul is still kind of stuck in the past and in his anger. But once Maul tips to that point of being a threat to Luke, that's when Obi-Wan's like, okay, I got to take this guy down, because it's not about me. It's about making sure the kid grows up. And
Yeah.
I can't let this guy get to the kid. And if that means I have to strike him down, then I'm going to do that.
Well, and when you look at what that fight is too, it's a couple swings of the lightsaber.
Yeah.
It's not what we got in the prequels. It's not even what we got in the original trilogy. Where if you look at, like, we'll take Luke's fights in Empire and Return of the Jedi, like, I feel like he was trying to prove himself some.
Yes.
There. And in Twin Sons, Obi-Wan is not trying to prove anything.
Yeah.
He's trying to defend something. And I think that's a really important aspect of it, because if you're trying to defend something, you're trying to control something, right? You're trying to have power over, like, I can do something about this. And sometimes you can, right? Like sometimes you do have some influence over it. So I'm not saying that it's blanket bad, but it is blanket good to say, like, I'm willing to let go of my need to prove myself, to validate through my actions, in order to get to the point that I'm trying to get to, right? And I think that's what service and stewardship is all about. Is like, I don't really care as long as it's moral how I get there. I don't care how hard the path is. I don't care what it says about me if it does better for this person or this group that I'm serving. And that's something like the Jedi of the High Republic, I think, really had down pat, at least in the novels that we get. And then you go to something like the Acolyte, and while I don't like that the Acolyte did this, like, it did do the job of showing the decay of the Jedi.
Yeah.
I feel like it was starting it like too strong too early in the timeline. That's a whole nother conversation that we've had. But you do see the Jedi starting to try to maintain that control and maintain that power. And it took their fall to get something like a Twin Sons, where Obi-Wan steps in and says, like, he goes through all those positions, honoring the past, not because he is trying to prove anything, but because he's letting Maul know, like, I have this experience. You're not going to get to me.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get to Luke. And he means those in two different ways, but it's all the same truth. That's a great pull there. And so as we kind of like bring this, around, we're almost at the hour mark here. Is there any example of like stewardship that, like, when we brought up this conversation, brought up this idea, you immediately came to mind? Because of course for me, like I said, it was Kanan, it was Luke, the antithesis being Anakin, but those are like really broad, ideas. Is there anybody that came to mind for you that maybe people wouldn't expect?
Oh, I don't know that someone unexpected came to mind, but I do want to bring up someone I think you mentioned in passing earlier, because I think it is important to highlight her again, and that's Leia. Like, I think Leia in so many ways embodies, and probably when I was thinking about this topic and I was thinking about people who kind of embody that in Star Wars, I think probably her name was the first, if not one of the first to come to mind, because you just think of like how much of her life is tied up in terms of service. She is in she's working alongside Bail in the Imperial Senate, and then she becomes an Imperial senator at 19, I think probably younger than that. I don't know exactly. I can't remember exactly when it is. And she goes obviously through this this terrible trauma of seeing her whole home planet and all her people get wiped out in the Death Star, and then she continues in terms of fighting, being this leader in the rebellion, and then through the New Republic being this, then all the way into the Resistance. And she's always
crazy timeline.
Yeah, crazy timeline to think about. Just the longevity and like her willingness to like do that service and do what's right, even though the costs are, like, you think about in Bloodline, right, where she's trying to sound the alarm about the First Order, and everybody is just like, sit down, like, you're just trying to be relevant, and like, be like, there's no threat. Like, she really loses her, she loses her career over like that, and the Darth Vader of it all. But like, she's willing to kind of lose that reputation and that standing, and become kind of a pariah, because she feels so strongly that, like, we need to, the First Order is real, it's a threat, we need to prepare ourselves for that, and we need to get ready to fight that threat. And so she's someone who just, like, constantly, no matter what the odds are, no matter like how bad things get, like, she's just constantly sort of committed to doing that service, all the way to the very end, where she gives up her own life to try to turn her son back to the light.
Yeah. Well, and even stepping in to train Rey,
Yeah.
like, she wanted to give up her Jedi training, because she thought it was the best path, and yet she's willing to let her own, almost even her own beliefs go for the betterment of somebody else, in a way. My mind goes to Iden Versio as one. Not because she tried to control in the past, and not because she was the best servant, but because of what I always go to Iden for, which is she had a set of beliefs, and yet she didn't dig her heels in the sand because she was more committed to her morals when those beliefs stopped playing out. And her
Yeah.
morals were honor, dignity, respect, and I think service. I think she saw the Empire as a means to serve the galaxy. And when she saw that that was no longer true, she didn't even rush to the rebellion, which is the beautiful thing. It wasn't like, oh, I now see that the rebellions are the good guys. No. The rebellion and the New Republic that she served was, she picked it because it met her morals, not because it was the opposite of the Empire.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think that's really, really important. And so for me, Iden comes to mind not because, she's nowhere near the for having a measuring contest between servants. Like, Leia's a much better servant, but I think what's beautiful about Iden's story is that she doesn't get stuck in her ways of, well, kind of like the Jedi did. Well, I've done this for so long, I've just got to prove that this is right.
Yes.
No, it's, I want to be this kind of person, and I'm going to go whatever direction leads to me being that. And she wanted to be a servant. She saw that as her role. She saw that her parents, she saw that as their role, as her mom being a propagandist and her dad being a military leader. Like, she thought that that's what they were doing. She later comes to realize they weren't, but that's just, to me, is such a good story of how, even if you're doing it the wrong way for the right reasons, like, you can change, and
yeah,
we don't get a lot of characters in Star Wars that we get to spend a lot of time with them post change, and we get an entire lifetime with Iden. So it's a beautiful story. If you haven't read Inferno Squad or checked out Battlefront 2, God, go do it. It's so good.
Yes, it's really, a really good story.
I'll be interested to see, kind of as a closing thought, going back to Leia, this legacy book that we're getting with Leia and Rey will be fun to revisit and see, how is Leia a steward in that book, and what influence does it have on Rey? Because, like you said, Rey is, at the end of Rise of Skywalker, she's a steward for the history of the Jedi. So we'll have to revisit this idea once that book comes out and we see. Who's writing that one? Do you remember off the top of your head?
It's Madeline Rue.
Okay,
and
so a new author.
Yeah, new to books, but not new to Star Wars.
Yeah, she did some short stories and stuff, right? Yeah. So that'll be exciting. Exciting stuff. Of course, we'll talk about it here. We'll talk about it on Don't Burn the Sacred Text. Davor and I can't resist from talking about Star Wars books on here too. So there's always a little overlap. So make sure you're subscribed everywhere, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. Make sure you're subscribed so you get all of our episodes. They're all free, except for Amanda's Patreon stuff. I'll come back to that in a minute. But also make sure you give us a rating and review to help more people find the podcast and see what we're doing. As I mentioned, we do have a Patreon, but it's not your normal Patreon. I'm not saying I'm not like a mom being like, I'm not the regular mom, I'm the cool mom. Our Patreon is not about us. We don't make money off our Patreon. We don't use our Patreon to buy new equipment, to pay for our hosting fees, for any of that stuff. We have our Patreon to put books into classrooms. We thankfully have the opportunity to do that through you guys donating, that we're able to put Star Wars books into classrooms across the country. And just, it's so nice to open the bank account and see the money that we've been able to raise through that. What we really need now, join the Patreon, get Amanda's episodes. They're fantastic. $1 a month, $3 a month, cost you almost nothing, and you're able to put a book in a kid's hand. What we really need is teachers to send these books to. There are book bans happening everywhere. Books are getting taken out of classrooms, all of that stuff. I don't care. We're sending books anyways. I don't care. We're sending books anyways. So don't let that fear of what's going on in the world around us stop you from going over to ClashingSabers.net and nominating a teacher. We'll handle that. You just fill out the form. You just let us know what to do, and we'll fight the fight. We'll that's our service over conflict. There is putting Star Wars books in the classroom. So make sure you go over to ClashingSabers.net. Just click on the menu button in the top right. You'll see nominated teacher. Literally in the box for this episode, in the box of like, why should you nominate them? I literally want you to write, because I want you to send them books. That's it. And we're sending them books. Okay, I want to come back on the next episode when we record 2 weeks later and say that I've sent a box of books, and we depend on you guys to be able to go do that. So ClashingSabers.net for that, patreon.com/ClashingSabers, and we'll see who the lucky recipient of our next book box is. Speaking of books, your wife has a wonderful book podcast that everybody should go listen.
She does.
You guys have more stuff going on over on your side of the country. So tell everybody where they can find you and what else you have going.
Indeed. So if you want to follow me on social media, I'm over on Blue Sky at Demondum. You can also listen to me as a co-host on Space Swifties, a Star Wars and Taylor Swift podcast that I host with my wife, the one and only Meg Bauer.
Awesome. So make sure you go subscribe to them also. Great stuff happening over on the Space Swifties feed. We do have to bring up the glaring red herring. I didn't mean to rhyme that at the end of the episode. And that is the greatest servants in the Star Wars galaxy. The ones really who, I mean, I've never seen them in conflict. Have you seen them in conflict? I haven't seen them in conflict. It's Batch 8.
Hi-ho.
Good stuff. See, we got 2 Batch 8 references in this episode, people.
Incredible.